Today I'm going to show you how to learn and memorize jazz chord progressions. If you're finding yourself learning tunes and then forgetting them, this video is for you. We're going to solve that right now. If you missed last week's video on learning melodies, go check that out first, because the first step of learning the harmony of a song is to be really solid on the melody, because it can really tell you a lot about the harmonic choices that the composer made. It also helps when you're improvising on a tune to have the melody in the back or even the front of your mind to play off of that for ideas and phrasing. So we're going to be using the song No Moon at All. After you know the melody, and you know it in preferably all 12 keys, at least in really well in one key, you want to go back to those same recordings that you learned the melody from and just try to hear the bass notes. So on beat 1 and maybe beat 3 of each bar, see if you can pick out what note the bassist is playing. Now, in different recordings, there may be slight variations, so you may have to cross-reference some and see what the most common chord change is there. More often than not, the chord substitutions are pretty similar, and the two chords would be kind of interchangeable anyways. For instance, E minor instead of C major, and the function is the same. It's really not going to change too much. Make sure you're listening with good headphones and try to find a recording of the song that's high quality and it's easy to hear the bottom end. A lot of older recordings aren't recorded the best, and they can be difficult to hear, especially if you're new to this. Now, you might be wondering why you wouldn't just pull up a lead sheet and look at the chord changes. Well, it's a shortcut that will make you be able to play the song a little bit quicker, but you're going to be relying on reading it, and you're not going to have those sounds in your ears, and that's why you're going to forget it a lot quicker that way. That said, if you've never learned chord changes by ear before and it's a little bit daunting for you, try it without the sheet music at first, and then you can cross-reference it and check your work. And there might be some chords that you got stuck on, but just give it a shot. I think you'll surprise yourself. It also really helps a lot to know a few common chord progressions, such as a 2-5-1 and a 3-6-2-5-1. There are plenty of other chord progressions that you'll become familiar with the more tunes that you learn as well, but at minimum you should know how 2-5-1s work. So if you don't, go check that out, do some research, and then come back to this video. Now, if you'd like, when you're listening to the recordings, you can write down what the root notes are, or you can just memorize them by ear. Either way, the first thing you're going to want to do is sing the root notes. Now let's do that together for the song No Moon at All. We're going to sing it in the key of D minor. 1, 2, 3. D, C sharp, C, B, B flat, A, D, E, A, D, C sharp, C, B, B flat, A, D, E, A, D, G, C, F, E, A, D, C sharp, C, B, B flat, A, D. So work on that slowly on your own. You can use a piano or a guitar or something to reference the pitch at first if you need to, but try and get it to the point where you don't need to do that, and maybe just give yourself a starting note, and then you can check the D at the end to make sure that you're still on pitch. Now, once you're comfortable with that, the next step is to figure out the qualities of the chord, meaning is it major, minor, diminished, dominant, etc. And this may be the challenging bit at first, because you have to hear more than one note at a time, but eventually you'll get used to the different sounds of all the different types of chords, and it'll become easier. You'll also start to pick up patterns that tunes tend to have in certain styles. For instance, we talked about 2-5-1s and 1-6-2-5s, and there's a bunch of other turnarounds, they're called, which are often at the end of a form that a bunch of different tunes will reuse, and you'll hear these things popping up in all sorts of different tunes that you learn. So the more tunes that you learn, the easier it gets to learn other tunes, and the easier it gets to hear the chord progression right away, because you've heard it before, you've transcribed it by ear, and then you kind of have control of that sound because you know what you're hearing. It might seem like a lot more work doing it this way, and it is, but you're actually going to remember the sound, and you're going to gain the valuable skills that you need to learn a lot more tunes much quicker and have them stick. So I'm not going to tell you what the chords of the song actually are. You can figure that out for yourself, but I will give you a hint that in the A sections of this tune, it uses a lot of slash chords when you have the descending bass line bit, meaning that the bass note isn't necessarily the root of the chord. For instance, your first chord is D minor, and then the bass goes to C sharp, but that's not actually the root of the chord. In that particular instance, it's the third. So that one's a freebie, but the rest you got to figure out yourself. When you're learning how to do this, the piano is going to be your best friend. Even if you're not a good piano player, you just need to know the very basics to kind of get the chord shapes out. And there's going to be a lot of trial and error at first, but trust me, it's worth it. If you're new to this, I know it can seem a little bit overwhelming. I remember thinking, like, how do you transcribe more than one note at a time? Like, how do you hear 4, 5, 6 different notes? But you got to do it. It's the only way. And you'll surprise yourself, I think. So just give it a shot. Now, if you really want to be a stud and make sure you're not going to forget this tune, there's a few things I would recommend doing. And the first one is to play the melody in your right hand on piano and the bass notes in the left hand, and to do that in all 12 keys. Go slowly, keep it simple. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, especially if piano isn't your primary instrument. But what this is going to do is it's going to force you to think of the harmony as like how it relates to different parts of the song. So for instance, if you're transposing from D minor to B minor, now you know that is going to be B minor, and then you go down a half step, and that's the third of your next chord, which is going to be an F sharp 7 chord, the 5 chord, but with the third in the root. And when you can think of it that way, it becomes much easier to transpose it, and you also have an intellectual knowledge as well as, arguably more important, you have the sounds in your ears. You're able to sing the chords. And the other thing I would recommend doing is to sing the full chords, at least 4 notes. So you would go from the bottom up. It can be great to lift bass lines too that people play and just practice singing on the changes.